Thank you, Brad and Mel. Now that you are up to date on the project details and the draft Phase 2 restoration plan, I'll explain the draft EIS in more detail. The draft environmental impact statement for the proposed Mid-Barataria sediment diversion project is approximately 1,600 pages. It is a very large document with material that can get technical at times. Some of you may read the draft EIS from cover to cover, but most of you will have interest in only a couple areas of the document. By going through what is available to you in each chapter of the draft EIS, I hope to make finding what you wish to review a little bit easier. First is the table of contents. Use it as your guide to the draft EIS. Each chapter is broken into sections and then more specific subsections like the example for Chapter 3 shown here. Notice that the page numbers begin with the chapter, 3 in this case, then the page number where the topic begins. The table of contents also includes the page numbers to all of the tables and figures in the draft EIS. It also includes the list of appendices. Next is the executive summary. The executive summary describes the proposed action, lists the purpose and need along with the alternatives analyzed in the draft EIS, and summarizes the potential environmental impacts. The executive summary is intended to be a non-technical and condensed version of the draft EIS. If you plan to comment or have an interest in the proposed project, you may want to begin your review with this section of the draft EIS. Reading it may give you all the information you need, or it can help you flag chapters and sections of the draft EIS you may want to review in more detail. Chapter 1 establishes the draft EIS purpose and need. The purpose and need statement is considered to be a foundational piece of the document because it helps determine which alternatives will be carried forward in the EIS analysis. As we have discussed, this draft EIS serves many different agencies, but for the core, the meat of the purpose and need statement is underlined for you here. You can also reference Chapter 1 for project background and history, a summary of previous studies, a list of Corps of Engineers civil works projects within the proposed Mid-Barataria sediment diversion project area, EIS scope and relevant issues, and a list of agency roles and responsibilities. Chapter 2 is where you will find information about the alternatives evaluated in the draft EIS. It explains how the Corps, in coordination with the TIG and cooperating agencies, developed a screening criteria to evaluate a wide range of alternatives, including coastal restoration methods, project locations, flow capacity, and operational triggers, to arrive at the range of alternatives shown here. The draft EIS carries forward 6 alternatives and the no action alternative for further analysis. The 6 alternatives are all sediment diversions at variable maximum flow rates. A variable flow up to 75,000 cubic feet per second, which is CPRA's or the applicant's preferred alternative. A variable flow of up to 50,000 cubic feet per second, and a variable flow of up to 150,000 cubic feet per second. Marsh terracing in the outfall area was an alternative considered for each flow capacity. I included a marsh terracing example over to the side for you, but in general, they are designed to be little sediment catchers. Chapter 2 also includes a comparative summary of all the potential impacts for each alternative. If you are a casual reviewer, after the executive summary, this table, Table 2.9-1, will help you understand the construction and operational impact determinations for each alternative listed here. The Affected Environment chapter gives a description of the existing conditions and trends in the project area, which may be affected by each alternative. It establishes a baseline that we can then use to evaluate impacts in Chapter 4, the Environmental Consequences chapter. Chapters 3 and 4 are broken down into 22 distinct resource areas as listed here. The Environmental Consequences chapter is perhaps the most important chapter of the draft EIS because it explains the potential positive and negative impacts for each sediment diversion alternative in comparison to the trends and conditions from Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where you would go if you want a more technical explanation of the proposed project's direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts during construction and operation. In the draft EIS, construction impacts are considered over a 5-year time frame. The operational impacts spanned over a 50-year projection. Impacts are assessed for both context and intensity. Context helps you understand the duration of an impact and uses terms like temporary, short-term, long-term, and permanent. Intensity helps you understand the severity of an impact and uses terms like no impact and negligible, minor, moderate, or major impacts. For each resource, the context and intensity is defined, followed by the analysis of each alternative in comparison to the no action. Each section ends with the impact determination. In addition to impacts, Chapter 4 includes a mitigation summary outlining CPRA's proposed avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. By now, you've heard a lot about the core permit decision and the TIG funding decision, but there are a number of other laws and policies the draft EIS will inform. Some examples include the Endangered Species Act, Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Chapter 5 summarizes the means of compliance with all statutes, orders, and policies. Chapter 6 lists the names and qualifications of the individuals primarily responsible for writing the draft EIS. Chapter 7 discusses the past, ongoing, and future public involvement opportunities associated with this review. Also, the draft EIS is littered with acronyms. Chapter 8 has a list of all of them in alphabetical order for your reference. And Chapter 9 is the index, which gives page numbers where keywords and topics can be found throughout the draft EIS. I like to think of Chapter 10 and the appendices as our way of showing our work. Chapter 10 gives a reference list of all the best available science and literature used to help with the analysis and drafting of the EIS. The appendices are approximately 6,000 pages of 20 technical reports, studies, and analysis that was considered when drafting the EIS. The modeling and technical reports that I mentioned earlier by CPRA can be found in this part of the document. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you that the draft EIS for the proposed Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project is a large document that can be technical. It is available for the casual reviewer with the executive summary, comparative summary of alternatives table, and the table of contents to help you find areas in the draft EIS of your interest. From there, it ranges in complexity as you read through the draft EIS chapters, ending with Chapter 10 and the appendices for those who really want to dig deep into the analysis. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your participation and remind you that your comments play an important role in our process. So please send us your feedback by May 4th, 2021 by either the comment portal we discussed earlier, by traditional mail to the Corps of Engineers, and if you prefer to provide oral comments, please leave a message at 866-211-9205 or participate in one of our live virtual meetings on Tuesday, April 6th, Wednesday, April 7th, or Thursday, April 8th. Thank you.